Hello BookTube, it's me Bergie, and I'm here with my July wrap-up. I'm actually getting this out on time, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But I'm not going to say much more because I have a lot of books that I need to talk about, so I'm just going to go right to the general statistics of my reading month of July. In July, I read 14 books, which completely blows out all of the other number of books that I've read for the other months. So I did pretty well, I think. Pretty much I just spent all of July reading. I did nothing else really except for read constantly. So I read 13.5 physical copies of books, and I read 0.5 books on ebooks. I read 6 library books, and I read 8 that my mom owned. I read 0.5 from a male author and 13.5 from female authors, so unlike last month where it was pretty even, this month was heavily female author based, which again I'm pretty proud of because I feel like most of the books I read tend to be written by male authors, so I'm giving some female authors love, so that's a good thing. As for genres, 3 were paranormal fantasy, 8 were historical fiction / autobiographies, 1 was a romantic fantasy, 1 was a classic, and 2 were science fiction. Once again, this doesn't really add up to 14 because one of the books kind of fits for 2 categories, and I wanted to list both of them because both of them are pretty important. As for reading level, I read 1 adult, 4 young adult books, 1 new adult book, and then the rest, so 8 were middle or children grade level. As for publishing dates, sadly I had none pre-1800s or in the 1800s. However, I had 9 that fell in the 1900s, 8 of which fell before the 50s, I think, and only 1 was in the 80s. Then I had 1 for the 2000s, and then 4 for the 2010s. So I did pretty well with doing stuff before the 1990s, so I am pretty proud of myself. I do wish to get more older books into this mix, but as for variety, or at least getting more books read from earlier dates, I did pretty well. So I read a total of 5,396 pages, which if you do the math is about 174 pages a day, which is, I think, very awesome. I did really well this month, like I said before, with reading a lot. As for ratings, I gave 10 books I read 5 stars. 1 book was a 4-star read, 2 were 3-star reads, 1 was a 2-star read, and then I had 0 1-star reads. So yeah, those are the general statistics for my reading month of July. Let's get into the actual books. So the first book I read was The Mortal Instruments Book 1, City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Now this is a reread for me, and this actually explains the 0.5 for the medium in which I read them. I started out reading it on ebook because I had bought it years and years ago because I was traveling and I didn't have an access to a library and I don't own the book in person, so I first started out reading it as an ebook, did not really enjoy it and wanted to see if it was the medium that made me not enjoy reading the book, so then I switched to a hard copy that I borrowed from the library. Like I said, this was a reread for me. I read it my freshman year of high school, didn't really remember much, just knew that it was hyped everywhere, that everybody loves this series and Cassandra Clare's writing, and I wanted to rediscover whether I liked it or not. It had a slow beginning, I found, and I couldn't really get into it. I thought at first, again, it was because of the way I was reading it through ebooks, but once I got the hard copy, it didn't get much easier. I found not so many problems, but enough problems to make me not enjoy reading the book. So I did not find the characters to be very believable. The way they spoke and act was not how I expect 15-year-olds to speak or act. It was very tedious because the plot wasn't very gripping and the characters aren't enjoyable. I just did not have any emotional attachment to the storyline or the characters. Another thing is that 323 pages in, there is a brief point of view change or a perspective change, and I just found that really weird. I did not see that it added anything to the storyline, so that was just weird in my eyes. And then I just did not enjoy the writing style, period. It wasn't something that appealed to me or made me want to keep on reading the book, which is a shame because the premise, which is that it is mostly concerned with religious aspects, specifically on angels and demons. I found that very interesting. I just did not think it was executed very well, and it just falls flat. So overall I gave this a D rating. So it's not the best, but it's a little bit below meh for me. Books 2 to 9 all fall in the same series. It is the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. So I told you guys in my prospective summer reading list that this series is my mom's favorite, and the fact that I have not read it or completed it is basically sacrilegious in our household. So I quickly remedied that. I mean, I have one more book to go, but I read the majority of them. They're the first 8 of them. So if you do not know, this follows Laura Ingalls and her family as she's growing up in the late 1800s, and it gives an amazing insight into everyday life during that time. So you learn about settlers and their difficult work that they have to do every day in order to survive, because of course they don't have the ease in obtaining all the things that a person needs in order to live. And it also deals with social issues like Indians and women, how they view Indians and women. Now, I think this series is a must-read. I didn't finish it, but from what I've read, I feel like this is a must-read series. I know there has been some contention with how Indians and women are dealt with in the series, but here's the thing. That's how these issues were seen during that time. It's a true representation of people's attitudes and feelings and thoughts during that time, and I think that even though it might not be politically correct now, we can't just hide how people thought or ignore what people thought. I mean, it's part of our history, and I feel like people who are ready to dismiss the series because of the political incorrectness of how Indians are treated or how women are not given rights, it's a bit ignorant, I feel like, because it is part of our history and we need to know how our history has unfolded in order to make the world better as we go forward. So I think this gives valuable insight into the time period and is a very important read. It's an easy to read series because it is aimed towards children, and I don't know, it just makes me feel nice and warm inside because the family dynamic is just so beautiful, and then just how all the people act and their attitudes throughout it. I really am nostalgic for it, even though I've never lived during that time period. It's something that I wish kind of was brought back, all of the correct manners and positivity and that kind of stuff that we kind of lack in society now. It's just nice to read about. However, even though I do kind of desire to live during that time, it helps you appreciate how easy our way of life is now. We have so much we have easy access to everything we need in order to survive, whether it be food, water, shelter. It's just so much easier than it was back then. So I really do recommend this. I gave the books anywhere from an A to an A+, so I really do love this series. I think it's one of my favorite children's series. So the 10th book now that I read was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Once again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I do plan on doing the book review, I guess, or the book history about dystopian literature, so I'll talk more about it then. But I just wanted to say that I did find it interesting how it takes a very relevant for today political issue or social issue and twists it to an extreme negative that is still believable in order to create the dystopian society. And I think the writing style was overall enjoyable. It was a bit slow, but I find that that's the case for most dystopian novels, that it does start out slow. But yeah, I really did like and enjoy this book. I gave it a B rating. The 11th book I read was Gemini, which is the second book in the Luminae series by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I was so excited to finally get my hands on this book because the first one I read in the springtime of 2016 and I really enjoyed it, and thankfully I found that this one did not fall flat like some second books do. It was a roller coaster of emotions in the most positive way that keeps you interested and gripping and wanting more. The new characters that are introduced are enjoyable to read about and you want to know more about them, and then you can just feel the urgency and danger throughout the plot, partially because of the characters and how you want them to survive or to get through this difficult difficulty, and also partially because of the mixed media style. It just makes you feel like you are part of the story, that you're actually living it with the characters. And also another part with the mixed media, it does make this a quicker read. Even though it was over 600 pages, I was able to read it in 2 sittings in a period of like 24 hours, so it went really fast, and obviously I enjoyed the book. I gave it an A+, so this series, I expect great things. It might potentially become one of my favorite series of all time. So I really can't wait for the 3rd book to come out. I'm pretty sure that it's only going to be a trilogy, so the next one will be the last one. Unless I'm wrong, it might go on forever. Well, that's probably not going to happen, but it might go on farther than 3 books, and I hope it does because I really love this series so much. I think it is just amazingly done, and I just love it. The 12th book I read was The Diviners Book 2, titled Layer of Dreams, which is by Libba Bray. Once again, I did love this book like I loved the first one. Even though it did have a slow start like it did with the first novel, it is a slow start in which you still want to read more. It's not a negative slow start. It's just, you know that it takes a while to build up to the plot, and it's worth the wait. I love Sam so much. I really enjoyed his character in the first book, but in the second book, I love him so much. He's like my favorite character in the book. And in this book you also learn more about the characters that are diviners, and we eventually see them all come together, which I thought was really great and a nice thing to read. I was really invested in the story. Like I said, I really enjoyed most of the characters, and even the characters that were annoying like Jericho or pissed me off like Evie, I still loved their character, and it felt real, because even though I do have issues with them, whether it be they annoy me or they frustrate me, I can still say that they are enjoyable, well-written characters. I loved also the plot, and I loved the writing style, so all in all, this was an A- read. There was a couple of issues. The fact that I had to wait for Sam's perspective to come again, I just wanted it all to be about Sam because I love him, but that being said, I did enjoy the book so much, and I do recommend you read it. The 13th book I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this I picked up purely because of the hype on BookTube, and like I said in my other wrap-up, the June wrap-up, this hyped book from YouTube was completely disappointing. Okay, I won't say completely because I did enjoy a bit, but it was still not as good as I feel the hype made it up to be. I can understand with this book, unlike the other hyped books that I've read, why this book has gotten some hype. It's just personally for me, it did not fit my enjoyment, and I just thought it was okay. I wasn't really attached to the characters, and I didn't care too much about the plot except for seeing how it retold the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale story. So that was the only thing that really gripped me in it. As well, I felt like so much was happening in a short amount of time that not enough depth was created, so I felt like this book could have been broken into 2, so that way we can get the emotional connection for the characters or get more invested in the plot. But yeah, because of that, I ended up giving this a C rating, which isn't bad, it's just meh. I thought there was a bit that it can do better, but there were still things that made me finish reading it. The final book I read was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Now this is again a book that has been highly hyped on BookTube, and again it was a little disappointing. However, with this book I might actually go on and read the series because there were aspects that I quite enjoyed. I was more invested in some of the characters like Adam and Noah and Ronan, and the plot was a little bit more gripping, but the first third of the story was slow and a little annoying with the repetition of how Blue's true love is gonna die once she kisses him, and honestly that was a little bit annoying. Also, I did not really know what to expect with this book. I just knew that it was a paranormal book, but I knew nothing else about the plot. So finding out that it was really concerned with ley lines was really interesting, because I did not know that everyday people knew about what ley lines are. I only know about ley lines because it's part of fringe archaeology, and we only studied it a little bit because ley lines are kind of part of the the category of archaeology that's kind of not laughed at or frowned upon, but not really as widely accepted as other sectors of archaeology are. So I really found that interesting that it was about ley lines, and I think it incorporated it into the story in a very enjoyable way. So yeah, because of that I did give it a C+. There was room for improvement, but overall it was, I think, the most enjoyable hyped book that I've read, I think. Unless you count like The Diviners and Illuminae, which then... But out of the other ones that I read purely because of the hype, I think this was my favorite and I might continue on. But yeah, those are the books that I read in July. Please let me know what books you've read in July. Tell me if you agree or disagree with my thoughts on the books I've read. And once again, please let me know any books you recommend me to read. I am always open for suggestions. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.